July 3rd is National Crown Day, which is why you see me wearing my crown a little differently. It commemorates the passage of laws across the country that ban race-based hair discrimination in the workplace and in K-12 public and charter schools. CROWN stands for Creating a Respectful and Open World for Natural Hair. I sat down recently to talk about this vision and share hair stories with some women you know and women I can't wait to introduce you to. So thank you for joining us as we go in conversation on the CROWN Act. Thank you all for being here today and for holding space for this courageous conversation. And we thought that since we're talking about the CROWN Act and we're talking about what it does to outlaw hair discrimination, that we would start with the law itself. And so we invited Will Jawando, Montgomery County Councilman, to talk with us about this. We're sitting in Montgomery County, which is the first locality in the nation to pass the CROWN Act. So it seems appropriate to be here at Olympia's Hair Salon talking about this very issue with you, Will Jawando. Why don't we talk a little bit about the law itself, because you were instrumental in getting this through the council at a time when people were talking quite a bit about this idea of creating a world where natural hair is more accepted and people who wear their hair naturally aren't experiencing race-based discrimination.
Yeah, well, first, yay, Montgomery County. And we're here in Bethesda, the first jurisdiction to pass it, and I was proud to introduce and help pass that bill with my colleague, Nancy Navarro. It's so important because the legal protection, and I'm a civil rights lawyer, is part of it. It's that you obviously, just like any other employment discrimination, sexual harassment, you want to have the protections in place for people to seek recourse if they are discriminated against. But equally, if not more important, is the message it sends that you are enough the way you are, that your natural state is acceptable, that, you know, we've spent so much time in this country, hundreds of years, unfortunately, uplifting a system of chattel slavery. And in order to do that, we had to demonize everything about the people who were enslaved. Our hair, our lips, our shape, our color, of course. And it's really an extension of that. And I think the education of that piece and making people know that, yes, we should have the protection, but where it comes from, right? And we're still having that debate about where do discrimination and animus and division come from. And in this context, what the law says itself is that hair discrimination, natural hair discrimination for Black people, is the same as race discrimination because they are from the same fruit of the poisonous tree. And we were bold in taking that step, and I'm really happy that we did. We're now 20 states, over 30 other local jurisdictions across the country. It's passed in the House, not in the Senate yet. Senator Booker's introduced the bill there, but we still have work to do to get the story out. So this is why this is such a great and important conversation.
But this is not just a law to you. This is personal because this issue hits home. And I would love for you to share the story about your family connection to this issue.
Well, you look, I'm rocking a protected style today, right? You know, these, you know, with twists and curls. But really it hit home for me that when I decided I was going to introduce the bill several years ago, our youngest daughter at the time, who was 6, Ava, came home and told me and her mother, who Allison knows is a proud Hamptonian, you know, HBCU grad, that, hey, mommy, daddy, I want my hair to be pretty and straight like the girls on TV. And it was just like, and we've got black dolls, and she knows her history, and it had still seeped into her in a very innocent way at that age that, one, if you break down that statement, she thought because her hair was not straight, she was not pretty, and she wanted to be that. And it's this idealization of Eurocentric beauty that is part of the thing we're dealing with here. And so, one, Michelle, my wife, said, all right, I'm wearing braids, and she's worn them since. She's never gone back to not wearing natural hair because she used to, and it's okay however you wear your hair. Sure. But she wanted to send a strong message. We have 3 daughters that, you know, you are beautiful just as you are. So she switched that, and I started drafting the bill like the next day. I had been aware of it, and it's important to note too that it's not just young girls, they are, and women, it's obviously predominantly, but there are a lot of young men, you know, whether it's locks, you know, we've seen the horrible case of the young man in New Jersey who
in the wrestling match, in the middle of the wrestling match, had to cut his locks.
As he cried.
Yeah,
and as
it was hard. It was really hard to watch.
And every other week we're still here, you know, we just got through graduation season. You hear someone who's not allowed to graduate, or because they're wearing braids or locks. And so this is still out there, and that's why the work of Crown is so important, to get the protection, but also to send the message and educate people that, I never forget when I testified, and the state of Maryland subsequently passed the law. And I went to testify to support it and said we did it in Montgomery County. And one state senator asked me, well, what about if they're in a food setting and their hair is dirty and things fall out? And it just shows you how deep it is that our hair in our natural state to some is seen as dirty, which is just not true. It couldn't be even further. It's probably some of the cleanest hair you'll ever have. So we just have a lot of work to educate people about the importance of it.
There's work to educate people about the importance of it, but then there's the heart, right? And it is hard to get people to see the fullness of everyone's life experience. And so this makes that a little bit easier for people who are trying to navigate the space between the hair and the workplace, or the hair and the school, or the hair and whatever it is where there's been a barrier for them to be their authentic selves all these years later. And the Crown Act is still a fairly new law for us here locally, and perhaps one day hopefully nationally. What is your greatest hope for this, for the nation, really?
This is a part of a long struggle to say that, look, we are all enough. No matter where we come from, who we are, we should be accepted and be able to be our full selves and to have opportunity, right? And I'll just never forget, we had the testimony for a public hearing for the bill, and you had so many people come up. One guy who had worked at UPS who got fired had to make the decision, like, either be who you are or lose this job, right? That's a choice no one should ever have to make. And so for the individual, as I said earlier, it's important to say you are enough. And not only are you enough, we're going to protect who you are. And we're going to tell the world that it's against the law to say that you're not okay who you are. And then to people who might either subconsciously or not know or be educated, we're saying, hey, let's give you the history of hair discrimination, where it came from, what it is, why it's connected to a system of racism and discrimination in this country, so we can all move forward together. Because that's right now in our politics and in our country, there's so many people trying to divide us. I think this is an example of a way to say, hey, we're all in this together. Let's accept everyone for who they are.
Well, we thank you for making some time to stop by our sister circle to
I
have
appreciate
this
it. Thank you for letting me in.
conversation.
It's like my house. I got 3 daughters.
You are always welcome to be in the sister circle. Thank you so much for stopping by today. Thank you so much. Good to see you.
Good to see you.
All right, now that we understand more about the law, let's talk about our own experiences here in this sister circle. And I'm going to start by introducing everybody here. Delia Goncalves is our weekend evening anchor, and you see her great reporting during the week. Allison Seymour gets us up really early for Get Up DC as our Get Up DC morning anchor. Whitney Harris Christopher was once a news anchor for many years, has transitioned into a professor role at American University and researcher. Inez Tano is a dynamic young woman with a bright future. She has a great company called Main Coach. She has had some microaggression experiences on her journey into professional life, and she will be attending law school in the fall. And we round out this dynamic sister circle with Yolanda Ducille, who is a powerful champion for DEI, a sister to many, a counselor and champion for many others. She is a VP of Global Communications at NetApp, and we are so glad that you are all here today to talk about the Crown Act. I thought that we might start with our hair stories at WUSA 9. And so, Delia, I'm going to give you the mic first to talk a little bit about your experience. Your hair is gorgeous, beautiful, right? You have shown up with gray hair one day, and we said, wow.
I just went on vacation and came back with a new crown, right? And so it was a transition. My stylist, Olympia, had been encouraging me for about a year now, and she said, when you're ready, it'll look gorgeous. And I said, Olympia, I'm not ready. Just wait until I'm not anchoring. Maybe when I transition to another part of my career. Maybe when I do something else. What's the impact of having gray hair, right? Will I look old? What will that mean? And then one day we just walked in and said, let's not do color today. And so she just went with it and then cut it all off and said, here's the look. And I looked in the mirror and I said, first thing, I look like my dad. Because I had grown up with my dad, salt and pepper, almost my whole life. And it's been a transition and a transformation of falling back in love with myself all over again. It feels like myself. It feels empowering, liberating, right? I saved another hour in the salon, right? I'm not underneath the dryer with the colors. But it also feels like I'm giving license to other women to embrace aging gracefully and moving into your natural and beautiful self.
But it took a while to get here, because before you made it here, even to WUSA 9, you had to navigate through the space of, well, how can I wear my hair, and being told to wear your hair a certain way.
Oh, absolutely. And I just complimented Inez when she walked in the door, and I said that was my look throughout my 4 years of college. Big, bold, beautiful, luscious curls. And was told since I walked in, well, if you're in broadcast journalism, you're going to have to straighten that out and get a bob. And those voices just became louder the further along I got and closer to senior year. And instead of getting that straight bob, I resisted and cut the short pixie and wore it curly. Coincidentally, though, it took about 2.5 years to get a TV job. And I ultimately did have some sort of that straight bob for the first couple of years of my career. And so even though as a young college student I resisted, I fell into the pressures of having that straight bob to get that first job on air. And then grew out my relaxer, which is a different conversation, by the way, because I don't think I needed a relaxer anyway. But I think we were so ingrained as children to have beautiful hair. It had to be straight. We needed a relaxer. And so I had one in 6th grade and wore a ponytail for the first time and thought I was the it girl with a ponytail. But grew out my relaxer, and so that meant every time I went out into the field and it was humid out, I'd come back and it was curly. And all my colleagues were like, what did you do to your hair? It started out one way, and you came back a few hours later, it looks completely different. When you talk about microaggressions, we didn't have that language when I first came into the business, right? But that's what it was. It was constant scrutiny about what my hair would do naturally in its natural state and in the environment. And so I would literally carry around a flat iron, and before every live shot was pressing my hair out and probably, damaging my hair just so I wouldn't have to navigate those questions. And it really wasn't until I got here to WUSA 9, so that was about 13 years ago, that I wore my hair curly on the air for the first time on purpose. On purpose. And folks loved it. And so I love the versatility of going back and forth. I wear it curly a lot on the air, even at home. My kids prefer that I wear it curly. And I think it's a good example for the younger generation and for our children. I have 3 daughters, to see that I'm embracing my natural hair. So it's been a journey.
Allison, you have 3 girls at home as well. You've chosen to do your hair a little bit differently. You could also wear your hair naturally curly, but you decided early on not to do that because you didn't want the blowback from the people you worked for or the community.
Right. And so that, because like you, Delia, on the weekends, any pictures, go on my social media. My hair is curly with some product in it and I'm out the door, because that's how it grows out of my scalp naturally, right? And it's so easy. But I made a decision probably when I got to DC, maybe because I was in small markets where some of the stations, I was the first Black person on TV in the stations, because this was like 30 years ago. And but then when I got to DC, I said, you know what, that's for me. My curls are for me. You're not going to judge me. The viewer's not going to judge me. My boss, I'm not even opening myself up to it. But it's interesting because in that, are you then sort of dimming your light because you say you don't want the scrutiny, but really are you afraid that, well, they might not like me, or they might say something that I'm not going to like them, and I'm going to want to, so it was just the path of least resistance for me. And so that's just kind of where I found myself. But what I love about now, because I started all those years ago, when I go on my social media and I see younger women in the business, and they are just showing, whatever the expression is, that's how they're coming to work, and it's beautiful and it's accepted. And I see sometimes, this viewer, they on social media, they had something to say. But the public response is like, no, we support you. And so that's quite a change in my career, I think. But for me, if I'm in the field doing, it's usually fun things, because in the morning I'll have it curly, it's not a big deal. But no, I have never worn it on the set other than blown out and flattering to this day.
Wow.
You know what I mean?
And
I could do it if I wanted to, but I think it is a little part of me that, I'm not going to explain myself. I'm not going to argue with people. I don't have to justify my look. And so I choose to, just blow it out and flat iron it to go on the air because it's my choice to do so. But I feel like with legislation like the Crown Act, with public opinion, with being more in the truth of who I am now at this age, I'll do it, but if I feel like it.
Yes.
It's my choice.
Yes.
It's your choice, your prerogative.
Yeah, it's my choice.
With a little sass on the side, too. I feel that.
Right.
I feel
But
that.
it is sad that I would still be bracing, looking on social media, what person has something to say about whatever. How am I going to respond to it? Am I going to ignore it? Or what have you? But I love to see this younger generation of journalists and anchors and everybody coming into a workplace having the it sounds so ridiculous, the courage to wear your hair like you want to wear it.
Yes,
but there
it's real.
it is.
Yeah.
There's been an evolution. I've been at the station for 22 years now, and I remember in the very beginning, I've always worn my hair straightened, either with a chemical or with back in the day when they had the real iron in your head where there was steam coming out of it, and still have a little mark on the side when somebody missed my hair and hit my arm. Thank you, Mom. But I can't remember a time when I wasn't doing something to straighten my hair. So for more than 20 years that I've been in this business, I've been straightening my hair.
It just becomes part of the
it becomes part of what we do. It was what we heard, right? You have to look professional. You have to have your hair a certain way. And in my very first job, I remember there was a trade with a salon, but it was a white salon. So they didn't know what to do with our hair. They had Mary Kay makeup, which I'm sure is much better now, but back then it was kind of pasty. It didn't really do anything
What
for
market
me.
what city was
This was Flint, Michigan. This was Flint, Michigan at the
Utica,
time.
New York, same for me.
Yeah, so it wasn't a real viable option. I moved on from there to Baltimore and then here in DC, and I remember trying to come away from a perm at one point. And black women were calling me, they were calling the station, they were calling my hairstylist to say that my hair wasn't straight enough, that black women don't wear their hair that way. I didn't know about the word microaggression or whether that even applied to us. What I know is those words penetrated me because I was a younger woman at the time, and I just hadn't walked into my destiny or my purpose, and I wasn't, I think, as solid to the core as I am now. And so I put a perm back in my hair because I thought that was the thing you had to do. But it was so painful to have to do it. And then when you talk about being in the field and always flat ironing your hair, to do your hair this way, and I'm not sure people fully appreciate what it's like to be in these roles. If it's humid on the set, my hair is gone. So I'm literally saying to the producer, how long is that next commercial break? Can I need 3 minutes. Can you take me out of the end of this block so I can go to the green room, curl my hair again or flat iron my hair again and come back in here? And it's not uncommon to do that multiple times a day.
Me yesterday morning.
Yesterday
was hot yesterday.
Yeah. If it's hot in there and it's humid, And I think sometimes our colleagues who don't have hair, and certainly don't have the texture of hair that we have, don't have the appreciation for how much maintenance goes into to putting this thing that is considered professional, marketable, beautiful out there in the universe. That there's so much work that has to be done to do this. And so I think that's why I have such an appreciation for the Crown Act and for the fullness of the experience that I see resonating in such a beautiful way in you, Yolanda, and you, Inez, and you, Whitney. This ability to just kind of say, this is who I am, this is professional, this is marketable, this is acceptable, this is beautiful, and this is who I am, and I am enough. So I appreciate what the Crown Act allows us to do now as Black women and Black men, Black girls and Black boys. Whitney, you know this journey because you had been on it for quite a bit. And you tried for years to get your bosses to allow you to wear your hair naturally, but it didn't work.
It didn't. It was a huge struggle for me. I see my story and a lot of your stories already. When I was starting out in the news, I never even considered wearing natural hair either. It was just, if I want to work in the news, I'm going to straighten my hair and that's how I'll get a job. And so I started on the news with straight hair. My first market, they also had a trade. So there was a hair salon we could go to for free. And when I walked in, first of all, I just felt uncomfortable. I was used to going to black salons and it just didn't feel comfortable for me, and I wasn't really welcome there. They literally said to me, we don't do ethnic hair here. And so that's what I was told. And so I went back to my boss. I said, can I create a new trade for us? There are enough Black women here at the station. Can I find a salon that's willing to do our hair? And my boss said, no, it's take it or leave it. And so I went back, and eventually I found one guy who said, I'll try, I'll do your hair. And so this white guy,
I'll be brave.
and he literally would research and figure out, I found this new product I want to try. And he did amazing, and he grew my hair just long and thick and healthy. It was straight, and I was happy, and it was fine. And eventually I left. I had to go to a new market, and I noticed one day my hair went from just down my back to my chin, and I had never cut my hair. And so I just realized it was falling out. It was just so unhealthy. From the commercial breaks, I would be straightening it. There were times when my boss would be watching the news and saying, go straighten your hair, go straighten your hair. So I would feel this pressure all the time. And so I would go, and in the commercial breaks, I would straighten it, and I would just see like pieces of my hair falling out. And so I went to wigs, and I went to weaves, and even that wasn't working. I remember at one of my stations, I would get kind of made fun of, like, oh, take your wig off, let me see your hair type of thing. Or, I would, one time somebody texted me, or somebody emailed into the station, and he said, your wig looks tired. And I remember thinking, even my wig isn't enough, and so it's like I have to take my wig in to get it straightened and flat ironed and to get some life into my wig, and my look wasn't consistent, which is important as a news anchor. People are looking to you. So there was a running joke, every time we see a commercial of Whitney, her hair looks different, because one day I'd have a wig, one day I'd have a weave, one day. And so, my goal was consistency. My bosses wanted me to have consistent hair, and I'm saying, hey, let me wear my hair natural. This is the most consistent way I can wear it, is the way it naturally comes out of my head. And I got so much pushback, and oftentimes I just wasn't even a conversation that could be had. And so I started saving information about people wearing their natural hair. There were just a handful of people I knew, national news, local news, who were wearing their natural hair. And I would come to my boss and say, look, this person did it, and it was celebrated. Look at this viral story of this news anchor or this woman. And it was still no, until one day I got a new boss who said, okay, you can wear your hair natural. And so I wore my hair in braids on the news. I was anchoring the news. And even then, I remember I got micro braids, right? I got little teeny tiny braids so that it didn't look like a drastic difference from my hair, so that I didn't have these huge poetic justice braids on the news and everyone was shocked. So I wore these teeny tiny little braids, and it worked out. I was celebrated. We got a lot of positive feedback, and I'm thinking, of course, I could have been doing this whole time. And I felt my most authentic self. I felt even, some of our producers were saying, you seem more beautiful, you seem more powerful, you seem, like you're anchoring the news even better now, and by that time I was already transitioning out of news. And so that's when I started working as a professor and researching this issue, and I found found that a lot of my students who I've interviewed for my research articles feel the same way, that even now, all these years later, they sometimes are discouraged from applying for news jobs. They might go for a different career choice altogether, or they think, hey, I'm just going to straighten my hair so I can get a news job too. So it's still an issue all these years later.
You know, one of the things that you said to me when we were talking is how you had a boss that would text you in the middle of the newscast and tell you to go straighten your hair. You're supposed to be really present and laser focused when you're sharing information with the community that both inspires, educates, helps them make good decisions. And what did that do to you?
Yes. Well, first of all, it was a Black woman. You know, I thought I finally have a Black female news director and this is going to be it for me. And it was just even more pressure, you know? And so it just created a really stressful environment where sometimes I felt like I couldn't focus on the job that I was there to do, right? I was there to report stories, to anchor the news. And so it just added that extra level of stress. And we talk about hair discrimination, and sometimes you think you have to get fired for it to be discrimination, or you don't get a promotion for it to be discrimination. But all of these types of microaggressions are a type of discrimination. It's a barrier for you to do your job or to progress in your career. And so it was just a lot of stress, and I felt like there was just extra scrutiny on me as a Black woman doing the news. And I thought, you know, I want to be able to just do my job, you know? It's so stressful.
Inez, I know you were born here in the United States, raised in South Africa and the diaspora. You came back here for school at Dartmouth, and you start to experience some of these microaggressions you've heard us talk about. Tell us a little bit about your experience and what it's been like for you.
So it's really interesting because when I grew up, I think my mom told me this recently, but I also wanted to be white. I had that kind of, you know, struggle that I don't remember actually, but I saw my sister go through, and it was one of the most heartbreaking things that I've ever experienced, I think, as a big sister and also as a person who was Black. I never really thought about my race as like something that I needed to define or truly understand until I got to the US, because most of my family, we're all kind of mixed, right? So we talk about ourselves through like, you know, which, I guess, country or ethnic group we come from, and we talk about that very proudly. But here, you know, as soon as I got here, I was like, I was Black. There's no kind of if, ands, or but about it. I had to be Black. And so through discovering the fact that I was Black and experiencing my Blackness not as an African, but as someone living in America as an American, that was, I think, just so mind-blowing to me, because I had never experienced these things growing up, except for, you know, I went to a French school, and so we read books about, you know, kids in France with French names and winter and things that I hadn't experienced. But these were all things that I kind of had internalized, and I didn't understand that my story was different. And so when I got here and I was experiencing all these new things, I didn't know to put labels on these microaggressions. I didn't know what they were. I didn't know what to do with them. And when I would call my parents and kind of talk about it with them, you know, they lived in South Africa, which is incredibly, you know, racist at times as well. And they grew up at a completely different time when racism was completely different than the way that it manifests now. So they would kind of just tell me to, you know, just take it, because it was so much better now and people are evolving. And I think they used to say these words to me, but their actions showed me just how important it was for me to stand in my truth and to not straighten my hair and to not try to conform. But that didn't stop people from making comments about the fact that one day my hair was long and like here, and then it would get really short, and sometimes it would be, you know, really slick, but then sometimes, you know, I don't love tension on my hair, so I don't always kind of, you know, just like lay my edges down and stuff like that. And there are frizzy bits that come off, and that was an issue because it didn't look like I did my hair that day. Or, you know, I know a lot of, you know, girls in the curly community, they'll like usually wear it in a bun, kind of just like low maintenance style, and that's something that I do a lot. And there's always this worry that people are going to think that I keep my hair unkept. And, you know, in as much as I want to fight against these stereotypes, or, you know, I remember one time there was this lady who, I had my hair kind of natural, and this was around the COVID pandemic, so I had my mask as well. And so obviously you can't really see my face, but that's kind of the point, right? The next day I saw her, I had my hair in a half up, half down, just because it was a weekend and my wash day was coming up, so my hair was a little poofy, and I just wasn't going to do anything about it because my hair comes with frizz, and I embrace my frizz. I love it. I love my volume. You know, the more volume, the better, actually. And so I was just, you know, half up, half down. That's fine. I have, you know, to travel, so it'll be easy this way. And she said to me, you know, you're so much prettier when I can see your face. Or, you know, those comments that I would get about how so much pretty I am when I, you know, wear my hair straightened, or when I pull it back. And I find ways to, you know, I understand that I look racially ambiguous at times, but that doesn't negate the fact that my experience is the Black experience, and I shouldn't have to, you know, adjust my hair or my way of speaking to kind of just like appeal to other people. And because I went to Dartmouth, and I'm very proud of that, obviously, because that's, you know, quite an achievement, especially coming from, you know, an international background. I've always been in predominantly white spaces, and I understand that it's a privilege to be in those spaces, but it's also really difficult because you want to stand in your truth and you want to, you know, be who you are. And I don't think that that's such a big thing to ask for. You know, some people, they just wake up and show up to work. And I have to, you know, if I want to curl my hair, it's still a lot of work. The wash days, they're a lot of work. If I want to straighten it, it's a lot of work. It's a lot of work regardless, right? So I should be allowed to choose what kind of work I want to put into my hair. And so, you know, showing up into these predominantly white spaces, predominantly white male, it was very hard to decide, you know, am I going to let this job pass me by? Am I going to even think about the opportunity of being seen as unprofessional, or am I just going to bite the bullet and then once I get the job, wear my hair natural? And you know, having these discussions, I think especially at such a young age, is so heartbreaking for me. And so when I see, you know, more and more Black women in positions where we can see them, right, that representation, I think it's so important to me, because I think about my younger siblings, my younger cousins, who all are probably thinking the same things I'm thinking, and who might not have, you know, the ability to articulate things the way that I do, because, you know, obviously if I'm going to law school, it is because innately anything that looks like discrimination and injustice, I will speak up and fight. So I'm really happy that they have these positive role models. And, you know, when I sit and listen to all of your stories, I feel so empowered, because I can't even imagine, you know, going through what you all went through, and just having people say no to you like that, and just choose whether or not to keep this job, you know, livelihood. And that's very important. Some people don't even have the privilege to think about whether or not they can lose this job, right?
So Inez, you had an experience where you interviewed for a job, you were pretty secure in the fact that you were going to get this, but they wanted to meet you in person, and something happened.
Yeah, that actually happened more than once. You know, the thing about discrimination, especially nowadays, is it's not really outwardly said. And so you're like, something feels very wrong, but you can never kind of, there's no quote unquote evidence, right? I don't have proof that this is what happened. But yeah, there have been a couple of times where I've interviewed for positions, especially, you know, after college and stuff, where I would be fine over the phone. Everybody was really interested in my background, my internships, my college degree. And all of a sudden, when it's time for video calls or in-person meetings, you know, I show up, I feel very confident. I know that I have the skills to get this job, and I never hear back after that interview. And it's really heartbreaking, because it always brings you back to that, is it me feeling? And I know that that's something that I share. I know that that's something my boyfriend and I talk about very often when he interviews for jobs as well, because he's Black. I asked him to grow his hair out. And so now we're both kind of doing this thing together, just figuring out what it means to internalize those messages and to fight against that. But I know that this is a very common experience for a lot of Black people. And I think it's very unfortunate that we've come this long across so many generations, and our stories are so eerily similar.
Yolanda, as you sit and you hear all these stories here, there is something that sticks out with me, And it sort of dovetails with what Inez was talking about, how she and her boyfriend talk about, how they're going to show up for these opportunities. And I understand that you and your friends talk a great deal before you entertain a job opportunity about, is this a company that will allow me to show up in my fullness, as my authentic self? A lot of time, more time than maybe you might spend just doing other research. And it seems particularly unique to our experience around hair.
Absolutely, and I'd love to talk about it. And your story is amazing. So I have 2 girlfriends, 30 plus year friends, all natural. We've all been natural for well over 20 years, all in corporate America. So have come up through the microaggressions and through the racism, from having a white woman ask me, can she touch my hair, and go home and tell her daughter, oh my God, I've met this black woman and I touched her hair, and her younger generation was mortified. You need to go back tomorrow and apologize. It's completely inappropriate. I've had a supervisor walk in my office and say, because of the products that we use in our hair that have certain scents, that is it not enough that I look like a chocolate bar, that I need to smell like one too? So just understanding the cultures that exist in certain spaces became number 1 on this list with myself and my girlfriends. And it was just an informal thing. Anytime either of us were going to interview for a job or consider an opportunity, whether it was a volunteer opportunity, work with an organization, we call a sister circle, much like this. It's 3 of us, and share what we knew about the organization, research the organization, help each other make decisions on whether or not we are going to alter our hair, whether or not we're going to straighten our hair, if we're going to wear a wig, and also set a threshold of when we feel like we can actually bring our full self. So what do you think? If I start January 1, May 1st, can I wear my natural hair? And so the time and the psychological weight that we have to carry, to me, took me out of being able to perform. I'm not focused on the job. I'm focused on how I'm going to be received. And that's just been something that's been a constant, it's habitual for us now. It's natural that we have that conversation. Now, me, more recently, I locked my hair in 2017 after wanting to lock it for well over a decade, have decided I lead with it. So if we're gonna discriminate, let's just get it all out of the way right up front. So I'm leading with my locks, you're going to see them naturally. I'm leading with my nose ring and the way I speak, and I'm Caribbean American. You're going to get all of that, because we are in a time and space where I think we need to be, where we're celebrated and not tolerated, and so that's been important to me. So it's been wonderful hearing the stories.
It's taken a while to get there, though.
Absolutely.
You have climbed this corporate ladder. You're now the Vice President of Global Communications for NetApp. And even now, you still experience microaggressions, even with all of the years that you've been doing this, that you've been laying the groundwork, that you've been showing up as your authentic self. Those don't seem to go away.
No, they don't. And it's unfortunate. I would like to also just celebrate that you get the microaggressions, but you also get the licensing that Delia said. You get the reward of the licensing. So the trade-off makes it a little bit more worth it. I've had folks in recent years say to me, walk up to me and tell me that they appreciate me bringing my full ethnicity to work. It causes me pause. I don't know how. How do you respond?
Is that a compliment?
Right.
Exactly.
What else can I do? Right.
Is that a compliment?
Right.
It has been a bit of a struggle continuing to navigate that throughout the years. I think what's most important to me and what's resonated with me and what continues to drive me is my kids. We talked about, you all talked about your daughters. I'm a mother of 5, given birth to 2, and my 2 birth children are also natural and they're locked. But my youngest daughter, at the age of 5 in kindergarten, started to go through an identity crisis. She was in a predominantly white school. Again, had I known then what I know now, we would have thought about this differently.
Yes.
But it's always felt like it needs to be a trade-off. Either you have access to higher level education and opportunity, or you have representation, so you have stronger mental and psychological, safety and health. And you shouldn't have to choose between those 2 things. And so at the time, I chose education because I wasn't necessarily thinking about the representation and the impact that it would have. And my daughter was in kindergarten, and she would constantly come home trying to straighten her own hair, using things like water and lotion, just hair oils, and just to weigh it down. And anybody who's done a child's natural hair, you're like, look, we don't have time for this. School starts in 15 minutes, so we can't reverse this easily. And we got into an all-out brawl one evening, and she looked me in the face and she said, I don't understand why I can't do it. You do it all the time. She was
So you were
5.
telling her one thing, but doing
I was
something
telling
different.
her one thing and I was doing something else. And she had been watching and responding to what I was doing and could not understand for the life of her why mom was doing it, to show up to the world, showing up in life every day in an altered state, and she couldn't do the same.
And your son had an experience as well with hair discrimination and a really tough choice to make that it seems really unfair.
He did. He's 23 now. We moved to Maryland in 2011. He was in middle school at the time, and he was a Division I prospect for football. He was also a musician. And in his 8th grade year, he was scouted by several Catholic schools for opportunity. That entire engagement was very new to me. I'd never been exposed to that. So we, coaches and counselors, connecting with us. And he got really excited about it. He went to multiple shadow days and went to multiple schools and honed in on a school and an opportunity. He played the tuba, so he had to do an audition and received a music scholarship. He was going there on a music scholarship, but would also be playing football. And they sold him on the entire package to come. And the school was great. And the administration was great. And he loved the people and he loved the culture. And the very last thing that we were told was that his hair wouldn't be acceptable. So he had to choose between the offer, again, choosing between the opportunity, or parting ways with his locks. And for him, it was a connection culturally. Again, we're Caribbean American. My father was born and raised in Jamaica and passed away there. So it's one of his cultural connections to who we are. So it goes beyond protective styling, and it really begins to challenge our identity and impact who we are as humans and our mental health. The decision was his to make. It wasn't one at that point in my career and in my life. After going through what I went through with my daughter, I was convicted that I wouldn't do that, and I would not pass that on to them, that they should choose, they should have the right of choice to show up to the world the way they feel the best, the way they feel the most confident, the way they feel the most, pretty, handsome, whatever that is, and equipped to take on the world. He did choose to cut his hair off, and he had a good experience at the school, but it was heartbreaking for me to see that. I mean, I kept his locks, for that reason, and I still have them to this day, and he has since relocked. And my now 14-year-old that was 5 has now locked. So it's been interesting to see what has happened, the license that we give to others, but the impact that we also have on our very own and how dynamic it is, and how my kids have really embraced who they are, and they're coming up unapologetically. And that's how they're showing up to the world. This is who I am. Take it or leave it.
We talk about, you've been a champion for DEI for longer than we've used those 3 letters to describe diversity and inclusion. But is this like weighty work? I mean, are you exhausted at times for taking this on?
I feel like that's a trick question. Yes, it is. It is weighty work. For me, what feels the most exhausting is having to consistently defend it or get people to understand the significance or why it is so important. Like, it really is a struggle. Like, why can't you just straighten your hair? I don't understand why this is the big issue. Well, why are we just talking about Black people? What about everybody else? Nobody else has to do these things. Well, because everybody else are the ones who made the rules, and those rules weren't considerate, of our community. And so that part, I think, is, weighs on me, and I have to sometimes step away from the work and do some self-reflection myself and remind myself. It's interesting that you say that. I've made a couple of pivots, in my life, and I've oftentimes stepped back and questioned, am I doing the right thing? Is this safe? Am I putting my future at risk? Will I not have opportunities, now because of how I look and how vocal I am on these topics? And I've had to really let that go and realize that we sitting here, and this is an opportunity and this is a privilege, now have a platform, and we have a responsibility based on that platform. And sometimes that responsibility does come with sacrifice. But for me, I have to still continue to take care of myself and have those inflective moments. But it's a responsibility that we have.
Before I let all of you go, because people are going to be watching this on Crown Act Day and beyond, I have to ask you, what does Crown Act Day mean to you?
It means being yourself and allowing the world to adjust to that.
Inez?
Love yourself and take time for self-care.
A hairdresser once told me, your hair is your crown of glory. And so just showing up authentically as yourself is the most empowering thing you can do.
Al?
Wow, I don't know why that question is so difficult. But for me, I guess it just means it's sadly, but license to be able to show up as your authentic self. And like I like to say, as your hair grows out of your head.
Yeah.
And to do it unapologetically and to know that the law is in your back pocket. Because often we've seen our struggle in these United States rely on legislation, and I'm just hoping for a day that it is federal legislation, so that if my child moves to Monroe, Louisiana, or wherever, and she wants to wear her hair as she wants to wear her hair, that she will be protected. So just for me, it's pretty overwhelming to see in our lifetime. We see this sort of legislation and you don't think it's that important, but it's actually everything. It's actually everything.
Yeah, it's so emotional. This whole conversation. You think about your journey and your children, and so I think it's about the message that you're good enough. You're good enough as you are and as God created you.
And we all have children, we all have daughters, we all want to model what we want the life for them to be. And so my greatest hope for this law is that our children see themselves as valuable, as beautiful, as marketable, as professional, as worthy of whatever opportunities come their way. So I thank you all for really holding this sacred space and this sacred conversation today. It was really touching. However we wear our hair, the crown, however we wear our hair, should be accepted as beautiful. And I hope that this changes more minds going forward. And so to you, Yolanda, I just want to continue to give you the strength to keep pushing ahead and making it possible for so many other women to look to you as the example. Inez, I see you as having such a great future, and I love how you are evolving and pushing the envelope even more. Whitney, thank you for the gifts that you took from your experience and that you're pouring into young people. Allison, you are always such a great example for all of us. You have been an inspiration to so many of us, and especially to your 3 beautiful daughters.
Thank you so much.
And Delia, you and your champion girls, they have no other place to look but you for inspiration. And so we thank you for how you showed up the way you are, unapologetically, and said, I am here.
And Lesli, we thank you for this opportunity to gather and to speak our truth. It is, you don't realize how emotional something is until you start talking about it, but it speaks to what we carry in our DNA. And so thank you for this opportunity.
This really is a healing moment and opportunity. So we really appreciate it.
Now you're going to make me cry. You don't know I'm already a crier. So,
thank you.
Can I add one thing, if you don't mind? And I know we talked about, I got to share, still going through microaggressions, and bringing my whole self to work now, but I do want to credit my current company for allowing me to do that, because it's been one of the most freeing opportunities. They have a culture of belonging that they actually embrace, and I've been able to put that to the test. And I think that that's important for everybody to hear. I said it at the beginning, to really seek out those places and spaces and environments that are going to celebrate us and not tolerate. And that's been phenomenal for me.
And I think we can even say that about the company that we work for now. Tegna really is all about bringing your authentic self to work. And I think to the extent that more companies are able to do that, and they realize the value in acknowledging the personhood of someone, adds to the productivity in any organization. In any organization.
Sometimes you have to make a switch to get it.
And I'm so glad you did. On that note, if you know. Thank you for joining us for this conversation. And we hope that you have these conversations with your sister circles. And more importantly, that you have them with people who are in your circle who maybe don't look like you and can learn from your experience, so that when they go into those other environments, they can help educate people too, because I think that's really important. So thank you for joining us on this Crown Act Day and beyond. Yolanda mentioned how grateful she is to work for a company that gives her the platform she did not have with previous employers. Hopefully, these kinds of conversations will urge other companies to put personhood in the same lane as productivity. By the way, the Crown Act and Crown Act-inspired laws have been passed in 23 states and 50 municipalities. The law passed the House twice, but still hasn't gotten out of the Senate. Some Republicans argued that the bill would be duplicative because federal legislation already prohibits race-based discrimination. We'll be watching to see what happens next.